Well, hello and welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all attending from around the globe. We are super happy to have you here today. The next 45 minutes or so are going to be chock full of information on how to help you become as productive as possible creating native mobile apps with your favorite framework, Vue.js. First things first, I have some webinar logistics for you all. If you can't hear me, which I guess of course you wouldn't be able to hear me say, but this is just a note for folks to try connecting to your computer audio, not your phone, to listen to the audio of this webinar. And as usual, everything you see here today will be made available on YouTube in the coming days. This means if you run into any audio or visual problems, rest assured you'll be able to watch this webinar in its entirety later on. Now we'll send out a follow-up email with this information included, but you can always find the NativeScript channel on YouTube at bit.ly/YouTube-ns. And if and when you have any questions during the webinar, what are you supposed to do? Well, I see some of you have already found the Q&A panel in your GoToWebinar interface, which is great. That is fine, but a better option for you is for you to use Twitter. Just submit your question and include the hashtag AskNativeScript to highlight your question, and our team will respond ASAP. We will be monitoring Twitter during and for a little while after the webinar, so get those questions in. Now, to stay up to date on NativeScript as a whole, I highly recommend you take a moment to subscribe to NativeScript News. We send out some really great info in this email newsletter, usually about once a month or so. Sign up at nativescript.org/news. And likewise, if you're looking for immediate help with a NativeScript question, don't hesitate to sign up on Slack. The NativeScript Slack has about 11,000 folks signed up and helping people with Angular, Vue, and everything in between. Get your invite at nativescript.org/Slack. Now today is all about using the uber popular Vue.js framework to create truly native mobile apps for iOS and Android. And as you'll see today, it's also about leveraging that same code to create a web app. And for me, it's kind of hard to fathom how far we have come with NativeScript and Vue. In reality, it's been just slightly more than 2 years now since Igor Rangelovic first mentioned on Twitter that he was able to extend NativeScript to incorporate Vue with creating mobile apps. To this day, Igor is still the critical component of NativeScript-Vue, and a huge reason why the core NativeScript team was able to announce a couple months ago that we now officially support Vue.js. Good times indeed. So let's get to the content and introduce our speakers. First off, my name is Rob Lauer, and I lead the Mobility Developer Relations team here at Progress. You can find me on Twitter at Rob Lauer. Far more importantly, today we also have Jen Looper on the stage. Jen is founder and CEO of Vue Vixens and a NativeScript-Vue Pro. Find her on Twitter at Jen Looper. We also have TJ Van Tol, who is our fantastic principal developer advocate here at Progress. TJ will be joining us to fill us in on the latest from the NativeScript framework itself. Find TJ on Twitter at TJ Van Tol. So I know that we regularly see a lot of people new to NativeScript at these webinars, or some folks who are just curious. A special hello and welcome to all of you. To make sure everyone is on the same page here, NativeScript is a free and open source framework used to create truly native mobile apps for both iOS and Android from a single shared JavaScript codebase. You're going to be using your web skills like JavaScript, CSS, and a friendly HTML-like markup language to create these apps. And before you say that sounds like Cordova or PhoneGap, nope. NativeScript is way more like React Native, but for Angular or Vue instead of React as the underlying framework. And yes, while today is all about Vue, of course, NativeScript does provide full support for both Angular and Vue. It's flexible enough to even allow you to develop without a framework, should you so choose. I also want you to know that NativeScript shines in some key areas when it comes to native mobile app development. NativeScript apps are truly native. When you add a button element to your app, for instance, the NativeScript framework automatically transforms that into a native UI button on iOS and an Android widget button on Android, all without you having to write a single line of Swift, Objective-C, or Java. Apps written with NativeScript use JavaScript, TypeScript, Angular, or Vue. Apps are styled with CSS, the same CSS you've been using for years. And as mentioned, the markup is a friendly HTML-like syntax. NativeScript gives you access to the entire library of both iOS and Android device APIs without relying on plugins. You also have the ability to share code between existing web apps and your mobile NativeScript apps. This is a big part of what Jen will be talking about today. Now, NativeScript is also built and supported by Progress, a global company based in Boston with an extensive history of providing tools and services for application developers of all types. And we are often asked, what's in it for Progress to invest in NativeScript? Well, we realize JavaScript is the present and future of mobility. So being able to give to the JavaScript community in this way is really a critical part of how we do business. NativeScript is also a key component of the Progress Kinve platform. Kinve is a high productivity platform that includes an enterprise-grade backend, the ability to create micro apps using NativeScript, web and mobile native chatbots, and a visual drag and drop app designer called Kinve Studio. You can learn more about Kinve platform at progress.com/Kinve. And while we're on the subject of Progress, we have a huge conference coming up next month in Orlando called Progress Next. Included are 150 plus sessions with a good number of NativeScript talks included. You can find more information and register at progress.com/next. Now, NativeScript itself has seen an amazing increase in popularity over the last year or so. We've had well over 4 million downloads, with almost 3 million of those downloads happening last year alone. And in terms of getting started with NativeScript, if you haven't already, take a look at the NativeScript Playground as a place to get going on your native mobile development journey. The Playground is completely web-based, so there are no dependencies or local installations you have to perform to get up and running. Alternatively, I can recommend a new workshop we've made available at nsvue-workshop.netlify.com. This is a more in-depth tutorial that you may want to tackle once you're done with the Vue getting started exercises on the Playground. And I just want to quickly mention the NativeScript Marketplace while I have you. The Marketplace is your single source for NativeScript plugins to extend your app functionality, app templates, and a ton of code samples. Everything from basic geolocation examples to a styled login form to gorgeous list views, filterable news readers, and so on. There's a lot to love in these code samples. And each code sample is also fully compatible with the NativeScript Playground. This means you just need a web browser and your phone to view the app. All the code is free and open source and works equally well on both iOS and Android. Many of the samples also contain versions supporting Angular, Vue, and plain JavaScript. So check them out today at market.nativescript.org. Now, if you're here, I probably don't need to sell you on Vue, but if I do, Vue is a modern and lightweight JavaScript framework that is booming in popularity. Like NativeScript, Vue is also free and open source. Vue is MIT licensed. Vue is built to be incrementally adoptable. What that means is you can use as much or as little of what Vue provides. In the Vue world, components are just reusable Vue instances, so it's easy to create reusable or shareable components. Vue.js is lightweight, weighing it at a whopping 20 kilobytes on the web, I believe. There's also a vast ecosystem of supporting libraries and utilities. Some AngularJS developers are migrating to Vue as an alternative to Angular due to the similarities the two frameworks share. And last but not least, all of us jQuery holdouts are seeing Vue as an easy bridge to modern JavaScript development versus, say, a React or an Angular. And I mentioned Vue.js being ridiculously popular, and well, yes, one metric is the stars on GitHub. 135,000 isn't too shabby. So these are all reasons why NativeScript-Vue exists and is here to stay. Now, before I hand the mic over to Jen, I wanted to make sure you stick around for the end of the webinar, where I'll be running through what you can all expect with the huge NativeScript 6.0 release coming this summer. And finally, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention JS MobileConf. JS MobileConf is a JavaScript developer event we are hosting in Boston this November. You'll find loads of talks on NativeScript, Vue, Angular, machine learning, serverless, AR, VR, you name it. If it has to do with cutting-edge JavaScript, you'll find it over our 2 days and 2 tracks of sessions. And a heads up that our super early bird ticket sales end at the end of April. I know these are almost sold out, so grab your tickets today. Okay, Jen, take it away.
Thanks so much, Rob. Hey everyone, this is Jen. I am always available for your questions on NativeScript-Vue at Jen Looper on Twitter. And I'm here to present to you today 4 cool and new things that you can try right now with NativeScript-Vue. And I'm going to go ahead and get started. So on the agenda today is an overview of code sharing. That's code sharing between web, Android, and iOS with a new Vue CLI 3 plugin. I think you're really going to like this. This is a very, very fun community-built project. I also want to cover how to use Vue DevTools. So this is something that we've been talking about a lot, but I've never really shown it in a webinar, so I want to give you an idea how this looks today and where it's going. I also want to talk about 4 routing strategies. Now, everyone cries a lot about the lack of support for the Vue router. It's a little bit out of our hands, but we have 4 strategies that you can try today, and there are more coming up all the time, but these are the 4 that I'd like you to take a look at. And so I have built 4 apps for you today to get an idea of different strategies to try with to handle your routing. And the last thing I want to show is how to use TypeScript with Vue. Now, we all know that Vue 3 is going to be rewritten from the ground up with TypeScript, so you may as well get used to this, and it's supported today in NativeScript-Vue. Okay, so let's get started. So let's talk about code sharing. Code sharing involves sharing as much of your code as you can in one monorepo between your website and your mobile apps. Now, NativeScript makes, of course, sharing between iOS and Android easy enough, but what if you want to also have a website that is using a certain amount of code between those 3 platforms? Now, we already have this very well-established strategy in the Angular community with NativeScript. You can go ahead and take a look at Angular schematics to share code between web and native. But we have a new Vue CLI 3 plugin that I want to show for you. It's a community-built project. It's pretty incredible. And if you take a look, I have created a repo called Mandala.me. It's on GitHub, and there are 3 folders. There's one with a straight NativeScript-Vue app that handles the web and the mobile. There's one for the website, which was done with a Vue CLI. And then in the combined folder, you'll find these 2 repos rewritten and combined into one folder using this new plugin strategy. If you're wondering what I'm talking about with mandalas, it's worth a little bit of research on Wikipedia if you'd like to take a look. It's an Eastern tradition, it's a meditative practice, and you're creating images within a symmetrical format that sometimes can rotate if you do it the way I'm doing it for a website. But there are other ways of making mandalas, including the Tibetan tradition of using sand to create mandalas, after which you brush them away ritualistically. So it's a very beautiful tradition of using art as a sort of a meditative practice. So I decided that I was going to create a mandala maker. And you're drawing on mobile, and you're presenting your mandala, you're constructing your mandala on the web. So this is live. You can see it at mandala-me.netlify.com, and I'll demo it in a minute. But the way I did it was by using this Vue CLI 3 plugin. So let's take a look. So you know, with Vue, we have this beautiful Vue UI, which was created by Guillaume Cho, and it is basically a GUI interface that covers the Vue CLI. So instead of working out of the CLI, out of the terminal, you can go ahead and use the Vue UI. All you have to do is have this installed globally and just hit Vue UI from the terminal, and it'll pop up this beautiful website, and you can start creating a website using the CLI. So I went ahead and did that for Mandala.me. I created a new project, and then I called it Zen Code Sharing. And then I went ahead and installed this new plugin that was built by folks in the community. So it's called Vue-CLI-plugin-NativeScript-Vue. That's a lot to remember. So all you have to do is go ahead and search, click search, and just search for NativeScript. And it's the first one that comes up in that list. So look for the logo. There's another project listed here, which is by another community member. It's a very interesting project using web components, but for the purposes of my project, I just wanted to try the new Vue CLI 3 plugin. So I went ahead and installed that within the Vue UI. So that's installed into my project. And then every plugin has a generator associated to it usually. If you've done anything with a Firebase plugin, you're used to these kind of post-install scripts. Well, this is a generator that allows you to configure your plugin. So it's asking you to enter a unique application identifier and some other questions. You can go ahead and pick this first default dropdown that it's a dual native and web app, and that it's a simple layout. The next thing you do is you go ahead and have everything installed, and then you can start running the scripts that are shown in the UI. And if you just click Serve Web and Serve iOS and Serve Android, like this, all of a sudden, isn't this amazing? You've got a website and then as well a mobile app for Android and iOS with routing and Vuex included. So this is a really super way to just scaffold yourself a really terrific starter project to give yourself an idea how this is all working. So what I thought I would do now is walk through, before I walk through the code, I just want to mention that you don't have to use Vue UI. You can go ahead and just do everything straight out of the terminal, hardcore. You can just do your creation script here. I have a couple of presets here. I initialize the Git repository, and then I just start the installation, after which time I run through the generator and then hit the run scripts to run the projects. So you can do it one way or another. Either way is awesome. Okay, now let's take a look at the code. So first stop for me in looking at this kind of project is to take a look at the package.json file. So here, because I have some presets already set up, I have the Vuex and the Vue router already installed. I know for sure I'm going to need the router and Vuex to use the data storage. I also have the latest Vue installed. And then, of course, we have TNS core modules, which are going to be used exclusively by your NativeScript-Vue app, and NativeScript-Vue itself, the plugin that we all know and love, that we're going to use for our mobile apps. And then you start to see something interesting once you're digging into this mono repo that was just created in the plugin. So here you see we'd have two main JavaScript files. Now, main.js is usually the kind of the brains of the operation. It's where you import all the plugins that you need, import your router in your store, and start up your app. Well, here, because it's a code shared project, we have main.js and also main.native.js because the startup routines are quite different. So the way the plugin is configured, we have two files, and then Webpack knows which one to pick up according to which build it's doing. So for a web build, it's just going to go ahead and pick up main.js, and for your NativeScript build, it's going to use main.native.js. So take a look at the way the naming conventions will show you which files will be picked up where. And you can see some basic differences here between what goes on in the web and what goes on in a native app environment. We have a different startup routine. Here we have the standard new Vue instance being created with the router and the store being imported, and then we render everything and then mount the app within the app div. Well, that should cue you in right away that we're not in a native environment, we're in the web environment because we have divs that we can inject code into. So for the native app, we never have anything going on in the DOM because there is no DOM, so we just render the app and start it up. So two different strategies here going on. So once that's taken care of, you can take a look at what goes on in app view, the second stop that you would usually hit once you're done configuring main.js. So this is your first Vue file that you're going to look at, and you notice right away there's some interesting stuff going on here because there are two templates. This is very cool. So here the Vue loader is able to pick out which template it's going to use according to the build that's going on. So we have the template web for our website, and it has things like divs and embedded navs and buttons in the router view, because on the web we can still use the Vue router, so that's sweet. And then we have the second template here, right side by side, which is template native, and that's going to be used by your NativeScript apps. So we have, this is where your TNS modules come in. So we're having the action bar module imported here, and we have a grid layout and buttons and things that are familiar to us as NativeScript developers. So it's really kind of neat that we have one file, and then we're forking the templates within the file. So I think as long as your templates are not too terribly long, this is a terrific strategy. But one great thing about this plugin is that it's very flexible and it offers a lot of power out of the box that you either can choose to use or choose not to use. So there are some components here that are presented to you in the components folder, and there are 4 of them actually. There's Hello World Android, Hello World iOS, Hello World Native, and Hello World straight up Vue. So in this situation, the developer has the choice of creating a completely different experience for Android and iOS, or do what I do and discard those files and just keep Hello World Native and Hello World Vue. So here, instead of forking the templates, we're forking the entire file again using the naming conventions that we used earlier for main.js. So we're back to these separate files. And the nice thing about this is it's quite granular and flexible, but if you don't need to do anything special, you just throw away the template that you don't need. And Webpack is smart enough to pick up what it needs to build. It's very sweet. And the other cool thing is that you can share styles. You can share them, I don't know if you noticed in that here, we have styles scoped, and you could scope your styles according to your platform, or you can have a shared style sheet here with the action bar living right next door to its friend, the WNavBar class. So this is kind of very nice that you can have such granularity that you could really share code within your style sheet and you don't have to separate them. So here is my website. It's called Mandala Me, as you saw, so you can visit it at mandala-me.netlify.com. And it's a basic Firebase website. I've been progressively drawing images on the mobile app and adding them in. I recently was inspired by spring flowers. So in Amsterdam, I drew some tulips here, and then a daffodil, and here's some scilla and some lilies of the valley. So I thought today what I would draw for you. I know you're very excited about this. I'm going to try to draw a pansy. Let's see if I can remember what the leaves look like. Okay, so since it's springtime, we'll choose a very lovely purple color. Use our paintbrush, a little bit of width, actually make it nice and wide. Okay, let's see. So pansies have like 3 bits here. I know this is not really a flower webinar, but bear with me here because it's springtime in Boston and God knows we don't have great weather here. So, okay, so that is that. Let's see, I'll change the color, give it a little bit of pink inside. I can't remember what they look like. It's like some pink, something like that, little dots. I don't remember. And then I'll add some leaves. So let me take the width down, add some color of green. And let's roll the dice and fire up the airbrush. Take the opacity down because it's kind of cool to watch. Okay, so let's see, airbrush. Let's see if I got the color right. Oops, it's still not green. So let's get the color back. Okay, airbrush. There we go. A nice green. I think they have a heart-shaped leaves. If I'm right, I don't really remember. All the botanists in this webinar are going to be saying no, it's wrong. Anyway, something like that. That looks really kind of strange, but oh well. We'll just say it looks good. Okay, everyone pretend that it looks good. So we'll just save this and upload it. So this is going up to Firebase storage. Great, it was uploaded. So let me go ahead and pull it up in the app. So there's my pansy. Okay, so I'll go ahead because I think one of the more successful drawings that I've done is the scilla. So I need 4 drawings. 2, 3, 4. Okay, so now you can build your mandala. Oh, it actually is not so bad. So that's kind of pretty. So here we have a lovely mandala that's spinning, and you can kind of think about Pure Lands. You can make it go a little faster, a little slower. That's very pretty. So this is a basic code shared app, and you have, the consumption of the images that you've drawn in your mobile app on your website. I like it a lot. This is the kind of demo I like to do, so I hope that you like it too. Okay, let's go back to brass tacks. So that's Mandala Me, and that's an example of how I built a code shared app, which you have shared code between web and mobile. Draw on the mobile device and then display and play with it on the web. So very fun. So I want to thank community members Gary Gamble, Manuel Celis, and Igor Rangelovich. Everyone knows Igor as being the awesome author of NativeScript-Vue, but the other two community members did an incredible amount of work, and I'm still working on perfecting this plugin. But it is ready for you to use today. You can create your own mandalas, or you can do something considerably more useful. Go ahead and give it a try. It's ready for you on NPM, and is all free and open source, of course, like everything we do. So very fine quality JavaScript. Okay. Well, here's another interesting demo app of mine. What I want to do at this point is show you DevTools. So this is super, super useful for all of us who are trying desperately to debug our mobile apps. It is not easy to debug a mobile app, as everyone knows. But there is an integration with Vue DevTools that makes our life slightly easier. And this is really fun because you can go ahead and start drilling into the views that are created in your app. So here you can see the 4 views that I have in my tab navigation, but it also has some interesting captures of the tap events that are going on. And you can also take a look at some interesting performance stats if you go over to this other piece in the DevTools, which I'll click on in a second, right here. So you can take a look at the performance of your bits and pieces as you click around. So you would start a performance test right here, and you would go ahead and you can see how clicking your buttons, changes the view, but it's not too bad. But when that mobile pops up, you do get a little performance hit. So it's kind of interesting. So you can certainly track what's going on in your app by using Vue DevTools. Very, very useful. And here's your component render. And it'll give you an idea of exactly how fast the components are rendering. I think this is really helpful. 3 milliseconds, honestly, is not so bad to mount your component. So definitely something to make use of with the Vue DevTools. There is a PR open that will allow us eventually to watch your Vuex stores being populated and unpopulated as you go on. It is not ready yet. We are pushing the Vue core team a little bit to get this ready for our community. So once that PR is done, we'll be able to go ahead and use that tab there that will allow us to drill into Vuex. So I can't wait for that to happen. Now, to get this thing working, it's actually quite well documented on nativescript-vue.org. All you have to do is install Vue DevTools. I have it installed globally. And you also need a couple of plugins, interestingly. So you need NativeScript Toasty, you need NativeScript Socket.io, and you need NativeScript-Vue DevTools. These are the 3 plugins that your NativeScript app needs in order to consume Vue DevTools. After that, in main.js, you would go ahead and import Vue DevTools from NativeScript-Vue DevTools, and then just use them as you normally would for plugins. And then run your app and watch the tooling. It's really, really fun, and I think it's super, super useful. Okay, at this point, let's turn our attention towards routing. Now, routing causes a lot of headaches in the NativeScript-Vue world because, as we know, the standard Vue router is not supported in a NativeScript-Vue app. So we have several options, and I'm going to give you 4 on how to go about routing in your NativeScript-Vue app. So I tend to use a lot of tabs when I'm building apps. You just saw that Mixology app, the cocktail app I showed earlier. That's basically 3 screens and a home screen. And then the tabs just import the views that I want to be showing at different times when you're clicking through the app. Now, I want to show you routing, but I want to also do it in a tab context. It's not the greatest use case in the world because with tabs, you're not actually in need of routing because you don't need to see the back button in the action bar. It's not a master detail scenario. It's just tabs. You're just loading up view by view. So I'm going to show you a couple of ways that we can handle routing within a tab context, and then a very basic master detail, home to second component type of routing that you can go ahead and use. I'm going to show you 4 scenarios. The first is the way I do routing, and Igor actually showed me how to do this, with no router whatsoever. And then I want to talk about how to use basic manual routes within a sort of a master detail context. And then I want to show you how to use tabs with manual routes. And then I want to show you a plugin that Igor has developed for us, which is called the NativeScript Navigator, and it offers some ease of use of manual routes so that you can go ahead and quickly get your routes up and running. So I've built a little app for this webinar, and it's for a spring flower show. So it just shows some information about the flowers that you might see in the spring. So we have a tulip page and a rose page and a sunflower page. It's very, very simple. And the way that it's constructed, let's just go back to the brains of the operation here, which is app.js. So here we just import home, our home component, and we open up our frame, and then we have home nested right in here, and it's ready to import all of these other components, which is tulip, rose, and sunflower. So 3 components for 3 types of flowers. I haven't used the tab navigator. I've created my own custom tabs because I like to style them a lot. So it's just 3 buttons. With certain classes that are binded to a computed property, navigation button classes, and that just changes the colors. It's nothing really to worry about here. But what goes on is as you tap it, it's selecting the current component, which is tulip, rose, or sunflower. And then that is corresponding to a components array. So all of these are loaded up in this component placeholder right here. So we have a v4, which is looking for the component in the components array that you just tapped on. And it's showing the component that is listed as the current component. So here I say the current component is tulip, tap it, and then I show the component. So that's working pretty nicely. But I'm sure you've been saying to yourself, wow, that doesn't seem super scalable or robust. You know, if we just load up all our components at the very beginning and then just display them ad hoc as you go through, you know, within some kind of tab context. Well, if you have something a little bit more involved in mind, if you have more pages to your app and a more complicated navigation strategy, you're going to want to use manual routing. And manual routing is well described in the documentation here on NativeScript-Vue. So just look for manual routing, and it's described as consisting of convenience functions. So there's navigate to, navigate back, and then show modal. I primarily use navigate to. Once in a while, navigate back. So this is kind of an easy description of how to go about creating manual navigation. You're going to be wanting to do it within a frame, and I just go ahead and read through the documentation, but I've created for you a super basic manual example. And here we have a very standard NativeScript-Vue app here. There's nothing fancy going on in the creation of the Vue instance. We just render the frame like what we saw when I first began, and then just start it up. Here then I have this home screen, and this app actually looks like this. So what it's doing is I'm now on my home screen, and I'm going to find me a tulip, and then I can go back. You see the back button right there? That shows you that you're actually routing using manual navigation, standard procedure. So find me a tulip, go back. Find me a rose, go back. So using this, you're able to conserve your memory consumption so that you're not continually loading up new files as you navigate back and forth. So if you take a look at what's going on here in the home component, we have our stack layout with a button that has a tap function, go to tulip or go to rose. This could probably be refactored to be a little bit cleaner, but go to tulip function just has this navigate to tulip, and then the go to the rose function is this navigate to the rose. And these are named routes. So I imported tulip from tulip and rose from rose so that I know where to go. So this is just extremely, extremely simple. So you just have your routes named, imported, and then navigate to them. Okay, for my third example, I want to show you some strange stuff that can happen when you're trying to pair a tab navigation strategy with a manual router. So I've loaded up this app, and I'm going to show you what goes on here. So here I'm on my tulip page, I hit the rose page, and you can see that back button showing right up in the action bar. So I can continue to just navigate to my heart's delight, you know, and then I get completely lost because these pages just keep loading up, and the back button just gets you a little bit lost within the app. So this app is actually a pretty robust app, because what I've done is I've taken all of the routes, I've put them into a routes file. So this is a more robust strategy than the app I just showed you. So you have all of your components imported here in this index.js file within the routes folder. Then I create the constant of routes, and I import those as named routes, and then I export the routes constant. And I can go ahead and use those within my app as I go. So here in the app view, which is sort of, again, the kind of starting place of your application, you have a content view and then your frame. So you always put the frame here within this kind of navigation context. Oh, sorry. And then I'm going to start with Tulip as my homepage. So I just import the one component Tulip and also my child root, which is the nav. So the nav is right here under the content view. So it's a sticky nav at the bottom. So that's pretty simple. So then my nav becomes the place where I start controlling the behavior of the app as I'm tabbing through. So here I have just a simple tap function, and I go to the named route of Tulip because I imported those routes from this routes file. So I go to either Tulip or Rose or Sunflower, and I use a standard navigation strategy of this navigate to routes and then the name. Now, if I want to stop that funny behavior, I can go ahead and have clear history set to true. So that will clear out my top navigation bar. So let's just take a look. So you can hit Rose, Sunflower, to Rose, Tulip, Rose. So no problems here. Everything's loading up nicely. The pages are recycling nicely, and the history is being cleared. So another example would be if you're on a login page and you want to get to the next page using the manual router, you can still clear history, and then you won't have any kind of weird back button on your internal page. I think we've seen that in our groceries sample app, that you want to clear your history. So this is a good thing to know how to do. Okay, so I just wanted to show you that as a kind of a more robust app with a good, clean navigation strategy. Okay, last but not least, I want to show you one more nice app here. Boy, it looks the same as the other ones, doesn't it? Okay, but I want to show you how you can simplify your life a little bit by using a plugin that Igor has developed for us, which is called the NativeScript-Vue Navigator plugin. So this basically offers some simplifications for you so that you can more easily manage your use of manual routing in your NativeScript-Vue apps. I like it a lot. So in this scenario, you again can just list all of your routes right in this constant by importing your components and then adding them into this constant. And then, you'd go ahead and build up your app.js file by importing the navigator from the NativeScript-Vue Navigator plugin, import the routes that you just created here, and use the navigator with those routes. Okay, go ahead and start up your app, and then you'll land in app view, as we always do. So here, instead of a frame, a content view, and then some kind of home page, we have a content view and then a navigator. A navigator is what the plugin is going to use to host the routes of your app. So you would then start building out your navigation strategy. For me, it's again the tabs in the bottom. And here when I tap, I just go to Tulip, again, Rose and Sunflower. So these are the routes that we listed out right here. So there's my routes, and here I'm using them. So all I have to do at that point, and this is already cleaner code than the stuff I showed you earlier, you just have a go-to function with your named route, you import your routes here, and then you go to the name of your route, and you use this navigator navigate right to that named route. So it really simplifies your life considerably and cleans up your code. So very straightforward. Go ahead and try this one out. I think you'll like it. I think it's my favorite strategy for when you need to have nice routes. So use that NativeScript-Vue Navigator and make your life easier. Why suffer? Okay, so I hope that little overview gave you a good idea of how you can handle routing in your apps. There's a bunch of ways to do it. There's no correct way, but I think that there are some good strategies there that will help you along the way. Okay, so the last thing I want to show you is how you can use TypeScript and Vue. So remember, Vue 3 is being rewritten with TypeScript, so let's get used to this thing. Remember when we were using Angular and we all came to know and love TypeScript? Well, now it's time to fall back in love with TypeScript for all you Vue folks out there. Okay, so the way I use it right now is also within the context of the Vue CLI plugin. So I created a project and I went ahead and added 2 more plugins. So when I scaffolded out the project, I added the the TypeScript plugin for the Vue CLI. So that's this one. Just search for that one. Go ahead and install that. And then I also installed the Vue CLI plugin NativeScript-Vue to create a code shared app. So once I did that, my project was ready to use TypeScript. And I just want to remind you of the difference that TypeScript will make in your life. So I know you're going to love this. So here is a non-TypeScript app, and of course there are no typings, so I can go ahead and create in my data method here. I can create a message, and that would be, you know, hello, or it could be 0, or any of these other things. There's certainly nothing forcing me to make one type or another here. Now here, in a TypeScript-friendly Vue app, boy, this starts to look very Angular-y, doesn't it? That's pretty cool. You can go ahead and start adding types to your variables here. So here I have a private message, and I could say it's a string, but you know, if I put 0, I immediately get that IntelliSense saying, no, no, madame, you cannot have type 0 assignable to type string. I would have to make this a number. So there we go. So types are ready to roll. Just go ahead, create your Vue app as a TypeScript implemented app, as a TypeScript friendly app by adding that CLI plugin, then go ahead and scaffold your app and it'll be ready to roll. So this is actually really exciting. There's nothing dramatic that we need to do to our NativeScript-Vue apps to make them TypeScript friendly. Well, we finally come to the end of my segment, so thank you so much for hanging in there with me. So I want to just finish by thanking you for allowing me to work with you in the creation and maintenance and extension of NativeScript-Vue. It's a fantastic project to work on, and I want to give you a present now. So this is a workshop that I created for you. It's at nsvue-workshop.netlify.com. It is ready to roll. You can go ahead and work on it together with colleagues or just by yourself at home. It looks like this, so it's a nice Vue press site, so we don't do anything if it's not in Vue. And it walks through, you know, creating a navigation strategy. It's all done in the playground, and then building out the screens for an app that looks like this. So it is a tarot reading card, but it's tarot with emoji, and it goes through a lot of fun things that you can learn when you're building NativeScript-Vue apps. So this is something fun for you. And I just want to close my segment by saying thank you so much for allowing me to work with you with NativeScript-Vue. And this is me and Ben Hong at Vue US. We were MCs, and we had a lot of fun with these crazy costumes as Vuenicorns. So thank you so much, and I will pass the mic right on over to my friend and colleague, TJ Ventol.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Jen. So Jen walked you through a bunch of awesome new features and tools for NativeScript-Vue. What I want to do is cover some of the features that are new to NativeScript itself, because all of these NativeScript features directly benefit you as a NativeScript-Vue developer. And specifically, we've already had 2 pretty big NativeScript releases this year. 5.2, which we shipped in February, had official support for Vue.js, so kind of a big deal, as well as improvements to our error logging, HMR, which we're going to look at in detail here momentarily, debugging with NativeScript, which you saw a little bit of that from Jen earlier, and our integration with the automated testing tool Appium. In 5.3, which we released last month, we took that same HMR feature out of beta. We added support for iOS app extensions, which actually allows your app to do things like appear in the native share widget in Today view on iOS devices. We made some more performance improvements, both to NativeScript build times as well as app startup times. We shipped a bunch of new unit testing improvements, such as the ability for you to unit test your Vue.js apps using the NativeScript CLI. And we also released 2 official new NativeScript plugins, the Picker plugin and the Datetime Picker plugin. So there's a lot here. So what I want to do is build a quick demo of a little mini form used for appointment scheduling. And the idea behind this demo is it should give you a guided tour of some of the more important new features, just to hopefully give you an idea of which of these features or workflows that you might want to incorporate into your own apps that you're building today. With that in mind, let's go ahead and switch over to my development environment. All right. Here you see that I have a really basic Vue.js app, as well as an iOS simulator where I already have this app up and running. This is actually the simple, just hello world NativeScript Vue app that you get from running TNS create on the NativeScript CLI. So nothing really exciting going on yet. The first feature I want to show you on this new app is HMR, or Hot Module Replacement. HMR is a feature of Webpack, and it's a feature we now fully integrate with from the NativeScript CLI. So here's how it works. If I drag over my terminal, I'm going to run tns run iOS just to run this app on this iOS simulator. And this is a simulator, so I'll pass the -- emulator flag. But instead of running --bundle, which you might be used to when running NativeScript-Vue apps, instead, I'm going to use the --HMR flag, standing for Hot Module Replacement. Now, this is going to run my app on my device as usual. It's going to perform an iOS build. I ship this out to this simulator. But where things get interesting is when I actually need to make changes to this app. So this is finishing up, so I'll drag my terminal out of the way. And now if I want to make a change, maybe I want to update this title here. Maybe I want to get really excited about this title. When I save the change, note how the change appears on this simulator without me having, or I should say, without the simulator having to refresh the app at all. And it's probably more obvious if I do this again. So watch how you might be used to the app having to completely restart itself after changes like this. But with HMR in the mix, you can actually see these changes basically instantaneously as soon as you save your files. And this is really powerful, as it just makes you a lot more productive as you develop your apps, as you can just see your changes that much faster. And we'll use this functionality as we start to build this app up and tinker with it. Now, remember from my slides that we want to make a small little appointment scheduler today. And to help us do that, I've already installed, if I bring up my package.json here, both the NativeScript Picker and the NativeScript Datetime Picker plugins. And I've also registered these in my app.js file so that I can go ahead and just start using these new plugins in my app's templates. And to do that, I'm going to paste in a new chunk of code that contains a mini form, specifically a date picker, a time picker, and a picker field. Now, the first two fields are coming from the new date time picker plugin. The first field is just going to grab a date from the user using the native date picker on iOS. The second item, the time picker field, is going to do the same thing, but just grab a time from the user. And the third field is using the new picker plugin and is going to present the user with a list of options they can select from a list. Now, as you see, we have some work to do to finish this, but for now, just focus on the high-level concept of just a form field that allows users to just pick an item from a list. To me, I found that I actually use the picker field quite a bit just because it's actually a good fit for a lot of situations where you might use a dropdown on the web. You can configure these plugins in many different ways. For example, you could change the format of the dates and times. By default, it's going to use the user's locale. And since I'm in the US, I'm getting US formatted dates and times that appear in this app. You can do things like set mins and maxes. So for example, I probably don't want users selecting dates earlier than today for appointment scheduling. So I can provide a min date option. And HMR just took that. And now if I use this native date picker, the native iOS picker, and both the native Android picker as well, prevent me from picking a date in the past. I'll show where you can look up some of these other options momentarily, but I do want to point out one additional thing here. One option that the Picker plugin has that is super useful to me is that you can actually provide a template. So if we think to the Picker here, you select options from a list, and then you have these items that appear here. You can actually write a template for how each of these options in this list actually gets rendered by NativeScript. And I will go ahead and paste in, just to start, a simple template that's just going to have a stack layout with the label that has, in this case, the location name for this scheduling program. And now HMR just took that. I can now select an actual location instead of seeing that object notation. But why I think this is cool is it gives you full control over how you present this UI. So you could, for example, for these locations, show like a mini map of the location, or maybe an image, or list hours, or whatever happens to make sense for whatever the app is that you happen to be building. Now, finally, one last thing I really like about these plugins is that they fully integrate into NativeScript's CSS system. So if I head down to the bottom of this file where I am controlling the styling of this app, I'm going to paste in a little bit of new CSS to style really all of these fields that I'm using. And HMR detects it, and you can see that these margins, paddings, border colors, all of these things that I'm working with work exactly as if I were using any other NativeScript user interface control. I also have full control over styling this template that I create. And it just gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of how you create and style and use these fields in the apps that you need to build. If you want to learn more, the best place to find information on these plugins, or any NativeScript plugins really, is on the NativeScript marketplace at market.nativescript.org. So for example, I just did a search for picker. You'll find that the actual picker plugin is documented right here. The datetime picker, the other plugin that we're using, is over here. And for each of these, you're going to get information on installing these in your apps, how to configure them, using them, different features, the different APIs that are available. So there's a lot here for you to look through and sort of check out if you have a need for this sort of functionality in your apps. All right, drag this out of the way. And at this point, we do have a functional little app, nothing too complex, but it is a little working form. And since we do, I want to show off another of the new features that we added with NativeScript, and that's our support for unit testing for NativeScript and Vue.js apps. The way this works is first I have to head back to my terminal. So I'll stop this run command and clear out my terminal. And I first have to run a command tns test init. Now this command is going to start by asking me what framework I'd like to use for my tests. So for the moment, I'll just pick the default of Jasmine. And what the CLI is going to do is just take care of installing any necessary dependencies and files that are needed to make running unit tests as part of this NativeScript app possible. And if I go to my app while this is finishing up, you'll see that there is a new test folder that the command created, as well as this example.js file with the world's simplest unit test of expect true to be true. To actually run these tests, if I bring my terminal back over, I can run tns test iOS, and I'm going to run this on an emulator and use Webpack to actually bundle these tests up, which is a requirement for NativeScript-Vue apps, which is going to, again, build my apps, but in sort of test running mode. And then it'll report the results of the tests back to my terminal. So there, it's installing the apps and running the tests. And what do you know? True is true. We executed one test successfully, and it went ahead and passed. To make this test a little bit more real, if we go back to the component code that actually has the simple form that we implemented, you'll see that the user actually submits a form. There's this little check to make sure that the appointment data that they've provided is valid. And that code lives in a separate appointment.js file. Now, this method is currently very simple. This is sort of contrived to make things a little bit easier, just to show you the general idea of how this approach works. But it does give us some logic that's ideal for verifying this functionality with some JavaScript unit tests. This is the exact sort of thing that you'd want to test with this sort of setup. So if I go back to my example.js file with these simple tests, I can import that appointment file so that it's available to use. And then in addition to this true is true test, I'll add one new test, or actually a couple of new tests that test that is valid method. So both with providing it some valid appointment data that makes sense, and then also some invalid data as well, and expecting the invalid data to come back as negative or false. And when I save this file, one thing cool is that the NativeScript CLI will automatically detect that change and rerun those tests automatically. And you'll see that this time, all three of those 6 tests ran and succeeded. Now, there's a couple things that I'll note. The first is, if you want to try this out for yourself, head to the NativeScript documentation on docs.nativescript.org and look for this section on testing, which you can find in the sidebar, or you could just do a search for unit testing and you'll find your way here. Now, this is going to walk you through the steps I just showed you, as well as a whole lot more, sort of how you add these to your projects, how you set things up. There are links to the Jasmine, Mocha, Chai, all the various technologies that they were building this on top of that you can sort of research and figure out the syntax that you need to implement the tests that you need for your apps. And the other thing I'll mention is that if you're looking for more of a functional testing solution, so something that goes above and beyond you just testing sort of individual methods in your JavaScript code, you'll want to check out our new documentation section on end-to-end testing. You can see that we have quite a bit of content that we recently added to our documentation. And in these articles, you'll find details about our integration with Appium, which is a functional testing tool that lets you automate things like starting up your apps and filling in form fields and tapping buttons, performing gestures, and a whole lot more. There's even articles on, once you get all of this set up, how you can hook that into a continuous integration environment so that you can just ensure that your apps are working as they should as you develop new features. Overall, NativeScript now gives you a lot more tools to just verify that your code is working as expected. All right, we now have a functional little app, and we've added some tests to verify that this app's functionality is working as it should. The last thing I want to show is our new support for iOS app extensions. And to show this in action, I'm going to, if I drag this out of the way, make our brand new Appointments app show on this screen of this iOS simulator, which if you're an iOS user might know that this is basically referred to as the Today screen on iOS. So there are official iOS apps that show up here, but there are also APIs so that third-party apps can appear and be eligible to appear on this list as well. Now to implement this, I'm going to start, I'll go back to my terminal, kill this test command, and I'm just going to open up a list of the files that make up this app. Now you might know that even though you build your NativeScript apps using JavaScript when you're using NativeScript, the actual native code that drives your application lives in your app's platforms folder. And you can open up your native application from this folder at any time. So if you're on a Mac, you can find your Xcode project, which is the thing that underlies your iOS app, in your platform's iOS folder. It's the .xcode proj file. And I'll open this by just double clicking. And in here, you can do really anything native apps allow you to do. And in this case, I'm going to go ahead and use Xcode to do file new target. Now it's on my second monitor, so I'll toss the command I'm doing down here just so you can see, which is going to let me browse between the many iOS extensions that you can add onto your apps. And as you can see, there's quite a few of them. Some of the more popular ones are the Share extension, which is going to let your app appear as an option in iOS's native share screen, or a Today extension, which is what we want to build. I can give this extension a name. We'll just call this Share extension, activate it, and then I can customize this extension in Xcode to my heart's content. Now, this workflow is something you've been able to do in NativeScript apps since day one. Except historically, there's been a problem. You might know that in your platforms folder, this folder in your NativeScript apps is essentially generated code. NativeScript rebuilds this platforms folder when you perform new builds, which means that changes like this app extension that I just added in Xcode get blown away every time I perform a new build of my NativeScript app. So what's new in this latest release of NativeScript is we now allow you to create a new folder in your App Resources iOS folder, which is going to be over here. And because this lives outside of platforms, you can place any iOS extensions you have there, and they won't go away when you rebuild your apps. So what I'll do is I'm going to create a new folder called Extensions. This is a convention that we have in place for creating new extensions. And actually, I'll back up. And then over here in Platforms, I have this Share extension. So I'm just going to copy and go into this Extensions folder and just place this directly in here. And then I need one additional file, which is this extension JSON file, which has a little bit of configuration that's going to help the NativeScript CLI build this extension into the appropriate place in your iOS app. And I'll show you how to configure this or the documentation where that lives here momentarily. And at this point, really all I have to do is build and run this app. So I'll go back to my terminal and I'm just going to fire up another build just to get this loaded over onto our device on this simulator. And while I do, just to head back to the folder structure here, really this extension mechanism, what I think is so cool about this is it's really working the exact same way that icons and splash screens and some of these other configuration files that we have for NativeScript already work. This is the exact same mechanism that plist configuration for iOS works and icons and all of these other things as well. And really, it's just some powerful new functionality that you can add to your apps using these existing conventions. And it's installing the app with this new extension in place. So now if I go back to the Today widget here, you'll see that iOS tells me, once the news loads, that I have one new widget available. And if I edit this, you'll see that I have my NativeScript-Vue app is now an available widget. So I can add it and I can see this exciting new Hello World widget that appears on the Today view of this iOS device. Today, the extensions you build need to be made using native code. So if I want to edit this extension to be a little more exciting, I would need to do so in Xcode today. However, as part of the 5.3 release, we're also allowing plugin developers to tap into this extension workflow. So over the next handful of weeks and months, you should be seeing some cool new NativeScript plugins that enables some of this new powerful native functionality for your NativeScript-Vue apps when they're running on iOS. If you want to learn more about iOS app extensions, you can head to this new page under the tooling section on the NativeScript docs, specifically devoted to the topic. This is going to help with some of those configuration files I showed earlier, help you get up and running with that. And if you're a plugin author, we do have some additional information at the very bottom of this page that talks about how to build plugins. There's also links to some existing plugins that are out there, samples that you can refer to when you want to get started building some of this functionality for yourself. So hopefully that quick demo gives you an idea of some of the new features in NativeScript that might be able to help you build your next app. I've got some links to some of the features that I showed today up on the screen, and I'll leave them up for a few seconds in case you want to do something like take a screenshot to refer to later. But really, all of these articles are pretty easy to find on the NativeScript documentation with a quick search. So again, docs.nativescript.org is where you want to check some of these resources out. And with that, I'm going to toss things back to Rob to wrap things up for today. Rob, want to take it from here?
Thank you, TJ, and thank you, Jen. I hope you've all seen how powerful the combination of NativeScript and Vue can be to build experiences across iOS, Android, and the web. So it's a very exciting time for us here at Progress. NativeScript-Vue is a big hit, and of course, NativeScript 6.0 is just around the corner. I'm guessing you'd all like to know what's coming in 6.0. Well, at some point this summer, we're thinking mid to late July at this point, you'll find some major new features coming your way. Let's start with Android X. These new support libraries from Google are going to enable additional scenarios for us in the future, such as our support for material design on both Android and iOS. Starting with 6.0, we're also switching to Webpack-only development. Have no fear though, as Webpack comes pre-configured and boosts your app startup time, limits app package size, and includes the ability for you to leverage features like hot module replacement. We're also excited to start offering official support for wearables like Apple Watch and Wear OS. And yes, I realize this is a Vue webinar, but the new Ivy renderer from the Angular team will also be supported in 6.0, which will provide amazing performance boosts for NativeScript apps built with Angular. Of course, there's much more coming, but we need to have some surprises, don't we? All right, where do we all go from here? Well, I encourage you to visit NativeScript-Vue.org for a full set of docs and resources. But if you want to get right at it, visit play.nativescript.org for an easy way to develop NativeScript apps in your browser. Also, be sure to try out the new tutorial at nsvue-workshop.netlify.com. And be sure to hit up market.nativescript.org for Vue-compatible plugins and free sample code to bootstrap your app. Finally, be sure to check out jsmobileconf.com and grab your early bird tickets while they still last. You'll see all of us at JSMobileConf, along with some other great speakers we have lined up. You can see a handful of them on the website today, with more coming very soon. And with that, I'd like to thank you all for attending. We appreciate you taking the time to go on this mobile app development journey with us. See you next time.